Building a family can be a complicated, messy, lonely, and sometimes heartbreaking process. But you don't have to navigate this challenging journey alone.
Welcome to the All Paths podcast, where we support and celebrate all of the different ways there are to try to grow your family. We are your hosts, Kate and Emily from the nonprofit organization All Paths Family Building. And today we're talking with Maria and Elizabeth about their journeys and their work in this space. Maria and Elizabeth, thank you for joining us today.
So excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, our pleasure. Thank you. So before we get into each of your stories, we'd love for you to briefly introduce yourself to our listeners. Elizabeth, will you go first?
Sure. My name is Elizabeth Horn. I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was diagnosed with infertility many years ago at this point. And it's been interesting to see how my experience with infertility has changed throughout the years and as I've experienced different things. But as I said, I live in Ann Arbor with my family here. I have a little puppy dog who I love to take out on walks. And I'm really excited to share more about my experience and the creative arts and infertility.
Great. Maria?
Hi, yes, I'm Maria Novotny, and I'm actually currently living in Montana. I've been living here for about a year, largely because I've been on sabbatical. So in my professional world, I'm a professor. I'm an associate professor of English at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And so my family and I had this little idea that we were going to just get up and spend a year in Montana, which has been wonderful. So we packed up our 6-year-old and our cat and our dog and 2 trailers and drove out to Montana. So I've been here, and I've also been able to meet a lot of different people who also have very unique infertility stories here, which has been amazing. And within the month, I'm actually going to be packing up at the end of July and then going back to Wisconsin, where I'll be living in Milwaukee.
Amazing. I did not know that. That's very cool.
Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourselves. We'd love to rewind everything back and talk about your family building journeys. Elizabeth, do you want to go first again?
Yeah, I can go first. So I was diagnosed with infertility back in 2010, so it's been quite a few years now. But I initially decided I wanted to build my family and was married and trying to navigate just going off of birth control and doing the basic charting things and things like that in the beginning, and just was struggling with having regular cycles coming off birth control. And after about a year, I headed to my gynecologist at the time, and we started in the typical course of clomid and timed intercourse, and I eventually graduated to reproductive endocrinologist and worked with her and went through a series of IUIs, did 4 of those, so intrauterine inseminations. I was diagnosed initially with a suspected endometriosis, which was later confirmed through surgery, and eventually diagnosed when I started IVF with diminished ovarian reserve. So had many fewer eggs that are follicles, at least, than anticipated when I did my IVF cycle. My husband also had mild male factor infertility, so that was a factor as well. But everyone was pretty confident that just some IUIs would kind of overcome a lot of those challenges. And I was initially very interested in adopting, and that was something that I was always interested in from the time I was young. But my husband's sister had just died, and that was informing a lot of the ways that we dealt with our infertility. We for a time had her 3 little girls living with us, and so just at this time when we were learning about our infertility, we had this awesome experience of seeing a glimpse at parenthood and having these 3 little girls living with us. And they eventually moved out of state with their dad, And that was a huge loss for us. Not only did we lose his sister, but these little girls that were a part of our daily lives. And I was really devastated by that in particular because I was thinking, like, what if this is the only chance I ever get at parenthood, right? Like, it was an extra loss knowing that I was struggling with infertility and losing that daily interaction with them. They're all grown now, and I'm pleased to report that I still have a great relationship with them and get to see them, not as likely or not as regular as I would like, but I've been able to maintain those relationships over the years. But it was really important, with my husband had a small family, and we just gone through this loss of trying what we could to achieve a genetic connection to a child in the beginning. So, as I said, we went through a series of IUIs and got to the point where we were ready to move on to IVF, except for that I was really struggling with that. Throughout my experience with infertility, was really struggling with what to make of it all, as I think many of us do. I was not so much ashamed of dealing with it, or of experiencing it, but more so didn't know what to make of it. And I felt like I had to figure that out for myself before I could really share it with other people. And that was challenging because, since I wasn't talking about it with other people, I didn't really have a community of support. I didn't share it with, even my mom until I'd been dealing with infertility for over 2 years. So that was really hard. And one of the things I did to cope with that during that time was to create artwork around my experience, having something visual that would represent what I was dealing with at a time when I wasn't really sharing that out loud and sharing that with the world. But I feel like the story could go on forever, as many of our stories could. I want to keep it as brief as I can. But we eventually did do IVF. We decided what was best for us was to do one retrieval and use any embryos that were created from that retrieval, knowing that that wouldn't necessarily give us the best shot at having a baby, but that was what we were comfortable with. So that's what we did, and unfortunately, I had complications during my egg retrieval and ended up with ovarian torsion and internal bleeding, which also complicated things. I mean, we had already decided that we were not going to pursue more than one retrieval, but that really, sealed the deal. We weren't sure why that happened. We didn't know if the torsion caused the bleeding and the bleeding caused the torsion, and it was a really pretty traumatic experience and required, surgery in the middle of the night to fix it. But once I recovered from that, we did do a transfer. We transferred 2 embryos the first time. We had 3 total, and that resulted in a pregnancy. I got pregnant with twins, but miscarried very early on. And then we took about a year before we were ready to move forward with our second and final transfer, which did not result in pregnancy. And then we took a long time off to regroup and try to, figure out what would be next. We were open to adoption or embryo donation, but we really needed to work on our relationship and ourselves first. And unfortunately, we did get divorced after several years. And, that's a whole story in itself, but it was definitely impacted by dealing with infertility. There were a lot of traumas that we experienced and losses that we experienced that we didn't necessarily know how to process in a great way. And we both didn't do the best job at that. And worked really hard at reconnecting, but ultimately decided to go our separate ways. And it's been several years now, and I am parenting, but parenting stepchildren, which is awesome. I'm really excited that I get to finally um, experience parenthood, and I love these girls. It definitely does, it's a closure in some ways, but it also is very interesting to navigate parenthood as a stepmom and interact with other parents and all of the joys and secondary losses that come with that as well. So a little bit about how I built my family.
Thank you so much for sharing all that, Elizabeth. I have to ask, did you open up to your community at any point during the process? I know you said initially you kept it really quiet. Your
Yes.
mom didn't even know. When
Yeah.
you did decide to kind of open the circle a little bit, who did you let in and how did you decide to make
Yeah,
that
that's a
leap?
great question. So I started going to a Resolve support group. So a peer-led support group with Resolve, the National Infertility Association. And that was just life-changing because it allowed me to connect with other people who were dealing with similar things and start to build friendships and learn a lot. I think that's one of the things that is really hard and can feel really overwhelming. Is trying to get information about what you might do to build your family. And I was able to hear what others were doing and learn about different resources that they had found and really start to build that community. And that's ultimately how I met Maria. But that was a really amazing way for me to find understanding. And I did open up to my family eventually too, and some other friends. But finding that initial community of other men and women and individuals who were dealing with infertility was crucial to me getting through that time for sure.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, Maria, I know you started to jump in, so I didn't want to cut you off. But I was just curious, like, how that decision-making process went from no support from the outside world to letting people in.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I'm glad that Elizabeth was able to speak to that, because I think that's an important part of even how we eventually met and what we'll talk about in
Mhm.
a little bit. But so my story is, I guess I will phrase it a little bit different, more so, more so. I was just really young when I experienced infertility. So, my husband and I got married right out of college, um, in 2010, right when he was finished, and his job moved us from Wisconsin to the western part of Michigan in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we immediately decided we were going to try and have a family. We both came from very large families. We were both the oldest of several children, and both of our mothers had gotten pregnant like in their 40s. There was no notion at all that we would have any difficulty getting pregnant. And so, in fact, there were like jokes about like the fact that we'd get pregnant before we were married, even, things like that. And so we tried for a year and nothing. And I was like, I think we probably need to like go and see somebody. So we got married in 2010, probably around like 2011, 2012. We went and we saw REI. And they ran blood tests and they did semen analysis. And everything in terms of like my ovulation seemed fine. And they essentially said, well, just keep trying, or we can start, to really pursue or think about eventually doing like some sort of IUI of some sort. And at this time, like we were probably maybe 25, 26. And I had at this time also decided to go back and get my master's degree. And my husband was working as an engineer at all these odd hours, like fixing, he was like working for like Kellogg's, fixing Pop-Tart machines that went down in the middle of the night. And there was just like a lot of stress. And I just remember being like, you know what? I just don't think pursuing this at this time is what is best for us. Like it just felt really overwhelming to do that, especially when we were so young. Infertility at this time, there's still stigma, but it was even more stigmatized, especially also being young. And I just was like, no. And we also had no money, to be frank. Like we had no money to do this. So the idea of also taking out debt to do that was just overwhelming. And so we just didn't. And instead, I was kind of stubborn naively and just thought, you know what, I'm going to get pregnant eventually at some point. Like there were stories told about my great grandmother who they took 10 years to get pregnant and then they had 3 children. So it'll be fine. So I just was like, I'm not going to believe this. And we just decided to move forward. In the meantime, though, it really took a toll on our marriage. I mean, we lived in a very conservative part of Grand Rapids, where there were a lot of people who were young and had children, and that those were our neighbors. And so it was really hard. And I remember just being really triggered by just seeing like, I'd walk my dog who became my little like therapy dog essentially. And, seeing the multiple different strollers around the streets, it made me really, really upset all the time. And so there was no support group in the area, and I was really getting frustrated. And I just decided I was going to write to this like local, it was like an online newspaper for the community. And I did like an op-ed where I basically came out with our story and said, I'm looking to create a support group, and started working with Resolve. And we made it specifically a couple support group because my husband and I both decided we were both experiencing these feelings and had no place to really share them with a lot of different people. And our family and our friends at the time also kind of knew we were going through it, but also I think they were in denial too, like, oh, you guys are going to get pregnant. Like, it's just going to take time. So we did that, and we created a little group and we found a community, and it was really, really important and really healing. And at that time, we also just continued to decide that we weren't ready at this point in our life to actually go forward with any sort of treatment. And I was also kind of thinking through a little bit like, how important is it for me to be pregnant? Like, do I really need to experience pregnancy in my life? Or can I think about other ways in which, I can be a parent, or do we need to be a parent? So we were also kind of contemplating, like, are we going to live child free, by choice or not by choice? I think we were also like debating like how we define ourselves within that category. And then also like if pregnancy was something that I really needed, my husband also has talked openly about just he had a more in the fact of like never being able to see me pregnant. That was something also that he was surprised that he had to like kind of go through and experience and cope with. So we did that for a long time. And during that time, he eventually went back to grad school and did a career transition. And I actually ended up going and continuing on with my PhD, where I ended up kind of doing work largely, we'll talk about it later with Elizabeth, on like storytelling and infertility. That's largely my area. So I started actually like bridging all these personal things with my professional identity. And it wasn't until I finished my PhD and I got my first job after that as a professor, where we would move back to Wisconsin. And I had worked like a year, and I kind of had a moment where we finally had like a little money because we weren't both in grad school. We were in our 30s. And so we had other friends who were kind of starting to have children, other family members. And I think also just returning back to Wisconsin with where we were both from and having those roots, we decided actually maybe we do want to move forward with some sort of building a family. But we basically decided that really adoption was going to be our route. We didn't feel at this point like we had still been like trying with no success to get pregnant, like just on our own. And I just felt like to spend all the time and energy emotionally, financially, with trying to figure out the diagnosis and the best, most aggressive route forward in terms of caring and having our own biological child, that was also going to open up a lot of wounds and be really painful in our relationship. And so we really just decided that we were comfortable with domestic adoption. So we started working with an agency in Madison who was really great. And within probably like, it was pretty quick, I would say, like within a year and a half, we actually were matched with a family. And in 2019, then we were able to, it was a great experience. Like we were in the birth room, my husband cut the cord. I was the first to hold our child, and have a really great open domestic adoption back in Wisconsin. So since then, we've been raising who is now our 6-year-old. And, that's never easy because people still ask, like, are you done? Are you going to think about a sibling? Things like that. And those are other things that we can talk about, which we aren't. And we feel very complete because we had a really great experience. But I think it's ultimately also because we really took a lot of time when we were first diagnosed to really work on our relationship and figure out, like, what does infertility, all the ways in which it was traumatic to us individually and then to us as a couple and on our relationship, to really kind of process that. Though I would say if I could go back in time, I would try and do more couples therapy. But that was not also like not a thing about infertility and then back then either. And so, yeah, so that's a little bit about my story and where we are today.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I mean, I feel like there's so many layers here and so many things that are so important that both of you shared. And particularly, I think the piece about the impact on your relationship, and especially, your relationship with your partner, if you have one, it is not talked about enough in our community and in the world, because it's so central to it. And yet, like, I feel like it's always just like you're trying to get like almost this like laser focus on like you're trying to build your family, you're trying to build your family, and not all the complicating factors and impacts that it has. We're not in isolation going through this. It's like you're dealing with so much other grief in your life. It's not like those other losses in your life take a break, or you can prevent them just because you're going through this other really huge life experience. So I'm so happy, Maria, that you formed that support group that was couples focused. Couples are welcome to come to our All Paths support groups together if they wish, but like we don't have one actually that's couples focused, and it's like turning a little wheel in my head that would be nice. I mean, I just love for people to have options, that if they want one where they come together as a couple, it's great to have that option. And I know they do exist, which is great. And if they want to come without their partner, that is great too. It's all about options. But it sounds like community for both of you was so important to getting through these challenging times, and finding those people, which is our mantra is find your people, finding those people that really can understand how triggering it can be to just try to walk your dog, which is trying to be your joyful part of the day, and then seeing pregnant people and strollers and being so triggered by that. Finding people that just instantly can understand something like that is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's so many people that I'm still super close to that I met during that time, and others that I'm not, and that's okay too. Sometimes those relationships come into our lives for a short time for a specific purpose, and we go our separate ways. But it's always really exciting to see updates from all those people that I've met along the way, and reconnect with them, from time to time, and just see how everyone's come through this in a different way, but all have found meaning and found meaningful relationships and connections, regardless of what they went through and how they ultimately built their families.
Yeah. So speaking of connection, how did you two meet each other and connect with each other?
Yeah, so this is Elizabeth. As I briefly mentioned, I was using artwork as a way to kind of cope with what I was going through, really wanting to find a visual representation of that, but also naively thought that someday infertility would all be over, so to speak, and I'd want to remember this period of time in my life, this, piece of history, and have a piece of history visually. And in creating that artwork and attending my Resolve support group, which I started out just attending, but the leader of that group chose to move on and step down, and I was able to take over running the group, and found out that there were other people who were also using artwork as a way to deal with their emotions and have a creative outlet around their experiences. And was really excited to find that. Ultimately, I just decided that I wanted to start doing more advocacy work, really, finding a way to take my experience and impact positive change. And so I made a decision to attend Resolve's Advocacy Day in Washington, D.C. I believe it was in 2014 was our first
Yes.
year. Maria Grace. And I saw that Maria and her husband were attending. I knew that they had a group on the west side of the state. Mine was on the east side of the state, in Michigan. And when I got there, it was a really amazing experience for many reasons. But one of the things that was really amazing was to meet Maria and to find out that she was also using creative outlet, in her case, more at that time, work writing to process what she was dealing with. And I had just a couple months before that opened my an art exhibit at the Irish Art Museum of Art and History in Jackson, Michigan, where I lived at the time. And that first exhibit had a lot of facts and figures about infertility because I really wanted to use it as a way to inform my community about infertility and kind of dispel some of the myths. And it incorporated artwork from some of those support group members that I had connected with who were creating artwork. And also some portraits. I was really interested at that time in showing people outside of infertility too, because I feel like so much is laser focused, as Kate you said, on trying to find a solution, and we kind of forget all of the other things that we are as well. I feel like a lot of that identity can be wrapped up in infertility, and so those initial portraits showed people, enjoying and experiencing things that they are and that they do outside of infertility. But I shared that exhibit, or told Maria about it when we met in DC, and she later had an opportunity to check it out. But we connected there, and both being support group hosts at the time, we kind of decided to meet on a regular basis, monthly. I think we decided at first to kind of have a person who we could, again, that community share that
Yeah.
experience of being a support group host, because that has its own challenges with it, right? You are building that
Yeah.
community and having all these people that you can talk to and experience things with, but it can also be hard to be the one that people are coming to with a lot of those things. So we initially started meeting to talk about, just kind of have someone else who got it again, and that in that respect. But both being interested
Well,
in creative. Oh yeah, go ahead, Maria.
well, I should say we both were like at a unique point where we were both running support groups, but kind of like on a break. You know what I mean? Like I
Right.
wasn't pursuing treatment actively, and Elizabeth wasn't either at that time because you had just
No.
had your failed IVF. And so it was also just a good moment because you have people in the group who are like having success, and there's a lot of emotions that come around that, I think, for us too. And so it was nice that we were both kind of like, personally, I'm just speaking, Liz, like to
Yeah, no,
be in that
absolutely.
same kind of like mindset of where you were at when your infertility journey. It was really comforting because there's just, I don't think there were a lot of people at that moment who were just like, we're taking a break but still going to be really involved in this community, which was unique.
That is
Yeah.
that is so wonder. I mean, Emily and I, as this is being recorded on audio, so
Yeah.
people won't be able to see how much Emily and I are nodding. But I think that is so special that, I mean, obviously the relationship you two have is so special anyway, but it's so special that you had each other in that moment, because that is very hard. You're holding all that emotion that's in the groups, but also your own and your own unique circumstances, you said, Maria, of kind of not even being able to actively be successful in that time, and not knowing what success was even potentially going to look like. Or so did you
Mhm.
guys literally meet like in the middle in Michigan?
Yeah.
We did, yeah.
I love that. That's
We
so
literally
awesome.
met at a cafeteria at Michigan State University.
I
So
love
I
So
it.
cool.
after my classes, Elizabeth would drive up and we would like it was a great little place because you could just like, spend
I
all
love
night there
it.
kind of talking, kind of like we were
I
in the
love
dorms or
it.
something together.
Oh, that's so
They
cool.
don't even know what fertility powerhouses they had in their cafeteria. I think there
Yeah.
should be a little plaque on one of those tables. Art of
Yeah.
Infertility was born here.
It's a rewarding volunteer role, but it is a very hard one as well. So having the connection with other group leaders is so important. I mean, we jokingly call it like our support group for support group leaders. We have a monthly call that
Yeah.
any
That's
group leaders
exactly
can
what
jump
we
on, just
called it
because
Yeah.
you
too,
need
right?
that. Yeah, you need that sort of support
Hmm.
for yourself going through this as a leader. Sometimes, there are stories, there are nights that just hit really close to home, and it's tough. So it's nice to be connected to kind of that next tier of support as well.
Yeah.
So how did you go from kind of those monthly support groups for yourselves as support group leaders to officially launching this organization?
Yeah, I think at some point it was probably in our second or third meeting that we kept coming back to the thought of, art. And one of the first questions Maria asked me after she saw my first exhibit was like, where's the diversity? And I said, yes, absolutely. Yeah, where, because being in one community and in my support group, my initial, it was a pretty homogenous group in terms of experiences and race and socioeconomic backgrounds. And I was new, that's not reflective of what infertility is. And we were both interested in looking at these other experiences and stories and making sure that that was represented. I think it's a lot better now than it used to be, but this was 10 plus years ago, and we honestly just started just traveling. I went out to some walks of hope out in California that were coming up and kind of set up a table with some artwork. And Maria wasn't able to join that time, but the next year we revisited that same community in Los Angeles and rented out a community center and just, told people we were coming. And so we just started doing together. We attended a medical humanities conference in Iowa. Actually, I think that was our first trip together, and just started sharing what we were learning about people using artwork and sharing some of those artwork, those art pieces and stories. And Maria, I'm sure you have more to
Yeah, I mean,
reflect on
it
that.
was very like a little grassroots. Elizabeth had, I think also just from our support groups too, we had just connected with some other support group leaders across different states who were like, this is cool. Can you try to figure out different ways to come out? And so, I mean, we tried to just figure out little ways to figure out how to get out there. So Elizabeth had some funds set aside, and I would try to figure out like how I could maybe. I was slowly like piecing together. I could probably do this for my dissertation, so I was trying to figure out like ways I could get the university to help maybe pay for this or that. But it was very grassroots, not strategically well financially planned, probably.
Yeah.
It's all good.
But
That's okay.
We're here for organic efforts that grow. I think the fact that assisted reproductive technologies acronym is ART has always struck me as like it is a coincidence, obviously, or I think it is, but I also love that. I've always taken a little bit of comfort somehow that this very scientific, I mean, incredible, but sometimes very impersonal feeling way to try to build your family has the acronym ART just somehow just makes me feel like good for some reason, which I feel like is probably weird, but more powerfully, I feel like such a strong belief in that there's such comfort in whatever your outlet is, like before you struggle to grow your family can and should be a great outlet for you while you're going through that. And I don't think everyone always thinks that way, or just you're so consumed with all the other things in your life. So there's no judgment in what I'm saying, but just like I know people have gone through very, very difficult life experiences and they are a writer. So it's like, it's just so natural to them to write about it. And then they've had people push back to them and say like, oh, are you trying to like have a blog that's going to make money from this or whatever? And it's just so crazy to me that people wouldn't see that you're trying to make meaning and trying to make sense of something really difficult through whatever your kind of comfort hobby is or even profession. You both have always been such a representation to me of that concept of making meaning out of this very, very challenging life experience with whatever vehicle brings you comfort and meaning. And it can be one that's new, or it can be one that was your standby comfort.
yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, that's really why that's how we came to be. It's like Elizabeth was making her thing because she had to. She wanted to commemorate it, and I was just writing because I felt like I needed to mem just remember this moment. And honestly, it was really cathartic just to like get it out onto words and just have it done. That brought a lot of healing in its own way. And I think what we've always tried to make clear with our mission with the Art of Infertility is that You don't have to be a professionally trained artist, you don't have to be a professional writer, but that there can be some surprising healing experiences that just come with embracing creative practices, whatever that might be. I think that's really what we continue to try to push in our work even today is, there's a lot of efforts to really increase access to mental health when you're going through infertility, which is great because I don't think that was there in the same way 10 years ago. But we really also want to encourage providers to think about mental health and creativity together. So while there's some great art therapists who work with infertility and that topic, there really aren't the same level of access, or I would say intentional, like bringing in art therapists, for instance, into the clinic, or bringing in infertility art into the clinic. And that's a lot, I think, of where we hope to kind of take the art of infertility in the next few years is how can we bridge those two, the mental health component and the creativity component together in really strategic, impactful ways, so that not just so that the whole person, I would say, actually benefits from it.
And I was going to add to that, one of the should have been surprising things when I put up that first exhibit was how people were using the artwork to share their experiences with their own friends and family. I talk about how I didn't share. It was really hard to start those conversations and have those conversations. But when you can have those conversations around a piece of artwork, a piece of sculpture, a poem, something that is there physically that you can talk about and reflect on your own experiences through was really incredible. And that's one of the things that we always strive to do too, is offer people opportunities to share their work with their communities and in a way that they can bring people that they know in and hopefully start those conversations and come to greater understanding.
And if I can just add, and actually, Elizabeth, I'm going to actually tee this up so you can talk a little bit about it. But what's been so cool, I would say, then within the last like 10 plus years as this has evolved, is now we've seen and have been able to work even with like college age students who were made through ART essentially. And so they are bringing in like their mom's journals, for instance. I'll have Elizabeth talk about a specific one and creating pieces of art around that. And it's also helping, I think, also shift the conversations around fertility in general and bring that into the younger generation, who I think is in general, right, they're more conscious of their fertility, but really also like helping them process their own making, like their own being created in that process. Elizabeth, do you want to say a little bit about the one that I'm speaking of since you connected with her
Yeah.
first?
Yeah, so we had connected. We were fortunate, along with Robin Silberglide, who is a professor at Michigan State University, to offer grants to students who wanted to create something around reproductive rights. We do this reproductive rights, WRITES, workshop for college students, and really offering them an opportunity to, explore whatever kinds of themes around that they want to. But one of the things we were able to do is offer grants for these students, and they had to submit a proposal, and we were able to choose students to fulfill these grants. And then we had the exhibit up for several weeks, but had a closing reception where the artists brought their pieces and we had those hanging. And one of the pieces, as Maria said, was uh, kind of mixed media painting collage of butterflies that had been made out of young student, Megan. She's I'll get you her last name. It's unfortunately it's a tricky one, and I don't want to say it wrong. But she had it on display and incorporated the journals that her mom wrote throughout her experience of dealing with her own family building, and that ultimately led to her conceiving her daughter via IVF. And we had the opportunity to put together an exhibit in New York City with Progeny and Resolve for infertility advocacy, National Infertility Awareness Week in April, and we were able to invite Megan to bring her painting and incorporate that into that space as well. And I think it was really an important piece of the puzzle, as Maria said. Now I mean, it's not new. I was born in 1978, the same year Louise Brown, the first baby created via IVF, was born. It's not new, but I think there's a lot more awareness and discussion around it, and it's really cool to see parents and children and people come together around this and raise further awareness, so that the journeys of others in the future are not so hard. It's hard no matter what, but if we can all work together and make it easier on each other, that's really, really special.
That's so awesome. Well, so Maria, I think you touched on this a little bit, but for either of you, I know you guys came out with a book. Like, what have been the recent and maybe upcoming exciting things for Art of Infertility?
The book was an amazing experience. That's like one of the first questions someone asked me after that first exhibit. It was like, "Oh, this should be a book. When are you doing a book?" It took a really long time. So the book that we finally were able to produce with the help of Wayne State University Press is called Infertilities, a Curation, and it incorporates visual artwork as well as narrative nonfiction from creative writers all around experiences of infertility and reproductive loss. And one of the things that was really important to us, again, with that was not only making sure we have a variety of diverse stories, but also pushing against that narrative of success ending with a baby. I think that's or a family, and families come in all different shapes and sizes. A family of two is a family, and a single person as a family. Like, I think a lot of times we use the word family to automatically include children, and that's something that I'd like to see expanded, because families come in so many different forms. But sharing those stories. So the book is kind of set up in 3 sections, kind of unofficial sections. Just kind of the beginning is like, getting diagnosed, kind of coming to terms with that, and kind of getting set up to maybe do something further to build your family. And then the second section has more of the kind of process, people going through treatment and that kind of thing, or experiencing adoption. And then the third section, it comes to some of those conclusions and definitely successes, but success looks different for everyone, and what is right for one person is not right for another. And I think that that was one of the things that I struggled with was, there are so many decisions, there are so many options. It's really hard sometimes to say enough's enough, and to shift your focus to another form of building family, or finding what your new identity will be. If it's not, that was one of the questions I had a lot, was, if I'm not going to be a parent, what am I going to be? What am I going to do? Right. So we really wanted to share those things through the book, just pushing it back against that success narrative of you have to have a baby in the end.
Love that.
We love it.
We created the book largely because, well, it happened during COVID, when we couldn't do exhibits, and we had this repository of art, and we also collected some new art to include in it too, which is great to really, again, amplify all stories. That's why it's Infertilities, right? Because infertility is not just one experience, it's a plural experience. But our I would say our ideal goal is also, like, it's a book that's it's like in size and shape purposely to like be a book that you can find at a clinic. Like, we want it in clinic spaces, because instead of reading, People magazine and XYZ person's like new baby and everything like that, those are great, like, little mindless reads. But really, we want it to be a book where people can find some sort of comfort and see themselves in it. And so that's really our goal, is we would love every clinic just to have one
Oh, I
copy
love
at
that.
least in it. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that, because like you're saying, I mean, the trashy magazines don't add any value to that experience. It's already rough, but
And half the time it has like pregnant people on the
exactly, like,
cover.
you can't
Like,
control what's going to be in there.
I mean, I have my People magazine moments. I'm not trying to be too cool for school, but like, like, let's get rid of that trash and put infertilityism.
Right. The idea of like, oh, this would be great. And if patients are reacting to it, like maybe they could have a local art therapist come in and do like an art therapy clinic or something like that with their patients, right? It's like just incorporating those stories and more so the idea that creative practices can be healing.
So, along those lines, for any listeners who might not have access to an arts therapist, do you have any tips for ways to get started? Or is it just very much get in the boat and row? Like find something that you want to try or that you already find comfort in and keep going? Or is there some sort of mini guide for someone who's saying, this sucks? I don't know how to deal with it. I'm not really processing or dealing with it right now. But the idea of trying something visual or something creative is appealing. What do I do next?
Yeah, I think, something that resonates with you is important. And actually, not to try to sell the book, but we did put a section in the book that has some really easy in that, it's all prompts for creating artwork and writing that with things that you have around. You don't have to buy anything special. We have instructions there for blackout poetry. That's something that's really simple. You have probably one of those. In my case, I was working Mother magazine that I was like, oh, I'm so tired of looking at this working Mother magazine. I need to do something to make it, really resonate with me. So I created a piece of blackout poetry around that. So in blackout poetry, you circle words and then you black out the rest of the words around it to create a poem. So that and other prompts that we wanted to include, you don't need anything special necessarily, but I think connecting with a local art therapist is really helpful. We worked with an art therapist closely with the book to make sure with Raina Black in Chicago to get that perspective as well because I think it's so important. It can be really helpful to work with someone whose specialty is that, but just picking up a piece of paper and for me, the one thing that's really easy to do is like just paint strokes on canvas with soothing colors, just something that's just makes me feel more at ease. So that's another thing you could potentially do as well that doesn't take much to start.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you.
Starting, I would say next fall, we're going to be working with another university, the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, really focusing on families and the diversity of family making for a new exhibit. And so that's going to be exciting because we're also going to be incorporating hopefully activities and the ability for these students to work with some of the artists who are going to be featured to kind of think through how they might do work around the idea of like family making. What does family making look like? So it really, I think, connects again to like a lot of what you all are doing with all paths, and then also again working strategically with the future generation who's going to be coming into these clinics soon, and also understanding the specific ways in which you have to really navigate that and be your own advocate, given all the different state mandates and new legislation that's impacting access to care.
It sounds like you're doing wonderful work. You've got some exciting projects on the horizon. So, for any listener who wants to get in touch or keep up to date with what's going on, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
So we do have our website, artofinfertility.org. So we have, information about past exhibits, upcoming exhibits, using creativity. We do have a section right now for professionals and for patients and for educators. So you can kind of tailor get your initial information from the area that best fits your needs. We always welcome people to connect with us directly. We can be reached via email. My email is Elizabeth at artofinfertility.org, and Maria's is, of course, Maria at artofinfertility.org.
Great. We'll be sure to put all of that info in the show notes. Now, before we wrap up, there are two questions that we like to ask all of our guests, and we would love to get your thoughts on them. The first is, what is one thing that you would say to someone who is just starting to grow their family? And the second is one thing you wish people would never say to people who share that they're struggling to build their family.
So I can go first for the first one. Elizabeth and I actually kind of talked about this, so we have some answers. Hopefully they're helpful. But I mean, I think this is obvious too. Something that I would say to people if they were starting their family is just obviously find your community, and also be open to, if there's a, a community that's not serving you, to also be okay with maybe stepping back from that community space, and really diving into one that's going to suit your needs better. There have been moments where, Elizabeth and I have talked about, just some family things where it's like, we're not going to be able to kind of go to that or participate in that in the same way that maybe we would have in the past. And that's been really helpful to figure out our own boundaries, and then also to have those boundaries, I would say, reaffirmed by those in our community who kind of get it. And it's hard. There's a different like mourning and grief, I think, that goes along with that, with infertility, that it's just like so complicated and complex, and it still continues with you, I would say, years after you've even quote unquote found success or have formed your own family. But I think it's really important and essential to just know who you can talk to openly and honestly. And for me, it's been someone like Elizabeth. Like, Elizabeth and I have just been through it. She gets it. I can say, so my sister's having another baby, and she knows that how I'm feeling at that moment.
Yeah, and I too, another thing that I think I always want to share with others who are just getting started is that I really felt like I burn out before I was able to reach the procedures that would have given me the best chance of success. So I always, if people are willing to hear hear my advice, want to say that, you know, do the most aggressive thing that you're ready and able to do, financially, physically, and emotionally, at that time. Because I think, I had coverage for IUIs, and I did that for so long that, by the time I got to IVF, I just lost so much of that stamina and was tired, and had been through so many losses. It would have been beneficial for me to jump to something that had a greater likelihood of success, even if it didn't work. It just, I think, doing the most advanced or aggressive thing that you're ready to do can help help you have the opportunity to actually reach that success. And then the other question of what do you wish people wouldn't say? Um, it was more of a question that people would ask me, that, you know, people who have gone through infertility have a lot of decision making to do. And the thing that was really hurtful for me to hear was when people asked me if that was the best decision, just like, oh, do you really think that's the best decision? And, that was really hurtful, especially when I spent so much time um, trying to gather my information and make those decisions. To have someone question that, who wasn't me. I was making the best decisions I could at that time, and it was hard to have people question that.
Yeah, for me, it's less about something anyone has said, and more so the not saying. So we know it's really can be really hard even to just disclose that you went through infertility, or to open up. And sometimes I've found when I do that, even now, like as someone who's an adoptive parent, and I say this openly to my kids, friends, parents, there's sometimes just like a silence, and I can't tell also if it's just them processing the information I told them, or if they don't know what to say, or them not knowing, like the tiptoeing. And for me, sometimes that's the hardest part, is I feel like I've just opened myself up to be really vulnerable and share, and then not to have that same engagement because I'm willing to go there, by me disclosing it, can be it's just disheartening, and can be frustrating, and feel othering all over again. And so I would say, if someone's going to open up and share that, to try to meet them, at their level. I know there's always so many things that you can't necessarily factor into what people are going to ask, but I think at least engaging, with the conversation is so important.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
love
I
those.
think it is, I do too. And I think it's understandable sometimes that people And in a way, I'm glad they're hopefully worried about saying the wrong thing. But I think sometimes if you're so unsure of what to say that you don't say anything and you don't reach out to people at all, that is worse. Like you said, that makes you feel alone and makes you feel like you shared too much or whatever. And even if they're pausing to think of what they want to say, it's like so easy to just say that they appreciate you sharing that with them.
Right.
And even just to say, well, we love knowing your family and we appreciate knowing that this is how your family came to be. Just say
Acknowledge it.
something
Yeah.
so I'm not feeling like
Right.
I'm out here again on like an emotional island.
Yeah.
It was fun to talk to you and catch up, and like so many exciting things happening. Thank you both so much. The art that you've helped share and put out into the world is such a gift as well. So it's really just truly so beneficial to yourselves, but to so much more beyond just the two of you as well.
It's been great though. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We hope you'll join us next time for more family building stories and resources. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you never miss an episode. And follow us on social media at allpathsfb or visit our website, allpathsfb.org, for more information about our work. All Paths Family Building is so grateful to the members of our circle of support who are vital to our ability to provide emotional support, education, and advocacy that is open to anyone struggling to grow their families. Today, we want to recognize and thank Fertility Centers of New England, a first fertility center. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please help spread the word so that anyone who is struggling to grow their family can join the conversation. It's an honor to walk with you on your family building journey.